With Nintendo being established as a playing card company in 1889, their association with the term video games is still relatively new in comparison. With his first traceable appearance in the arcade game Donkey Kong, Mario has become the default mascot of the company. Besides just being the star of his own games, Mario has also succeeded in becoming an icon in overall pop culture. TV shows, books, toys, you name it. With the Japanese gaming giant having a wide array of both home and portable consoles spanning many decades now, the Mario name as a video game concept has been stretched in every little way you could think of. Platformers, puzzles, role-playing games, racing, golf. Many could argue about the true number, but no matter what, we can all agree that the Mario Empire has an unbelievable amount of games under its belt. With many games naturally spawning a competitive nature, gamers since the very beginning have found ways to compete and one-up each other. In its earliest days, it may have only gone as far as beating your high score in Donkey Kong, but in the modern era, there is a way to compete in virtually anything. With the likes of websites such as Twin Galaxies and Speed Demos Archive spawning over the years, gamers all over the world have tried their hardest to break high scores and fastest times in hundreds and even thousands of games. By 2014, we got Speedrun.com, a site that would become a pioneer in the competitive gaming community that would end up being dubbed speedrunning. This site is a global hub for individuals and communities to establish leaderboards in literally any game that is being played. All you need is to request a board, get some active players with runs, and you have an entirely new community. I have scrolled through the depths of speedrun.com to compile every Mario game that has touched a speedrunner's hand. These range from the iconic classics in the 80s all the way to the unthinkable, categorizing these games from the most popular all the way down to the most forgotten. Today, let's tackle the Mario Speedrun Iceberg. With this iceberg being the behemoth that it is, things will have to be broken down into more digestible parts. As to be expected, let's start from the very tippy top. This entire layer comprises every game that most people consider a part of the Mainline Mario Series, which clocks in at 18 total games. Both New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe and Bowser's Fury are heavily debated titles in regards to this series, due to them mostly being re-releases. And even though I think you can make an argument either way, for the simplicity of today, I'll be touching upon these as well, so that puts the total amount of games here up to 20. Let's not waste any more time, and start back at the very beginning.
Disclaimer: due to the constant evolving nature of speedrunning, a handful of world records talked about here were beaten while making this. With this video being in the making for over 2 months already, there realistically had to be a cut-off date. All times mentioned here were the current record as of July 10, 2022. Also, of course, no one is a master of every single Mario game. Throughout this, bias towards different games over others may show in the form of how deep each run is discussed. I tried to include everything I considered essential for each game, as well as some fun tidbits sandwiched between. Thanks for understanding.
Super Mario Bros. The follow-up to the arcade game Mario Bros. Released in 1983, this was the first ever entry of what would become the Super Mario platforming series. Released in 1985, Super Mario Bros. Has cemented its place in gaming history. It has become one of the best-selling video games of all time, and is credited with not just establishing side-scrolling platformers as we know it today, but is also labeled as one of the key reasons why the video game industry recovered after the crash in 1983. Stacking this up against any modern title today, this game is obviously quite basic. There's 8 worlds, each containing 4 levels, with the last level always being a castle. The Super Mario Bros. Speedrun leaderboards have 3 categories: any percent, warpless, and minus world ending. Any percent is completing the game as fast as possible, without any restrictions. This is done by using warp zones in both 1-2 and 4-2 to skip a majority of the game. Warpless bans these warp zones and requires you to traverse every world and every level. Minus World Ending is a miscellaneous category that is only possible on the Famicom Disk System version of the game. This abuses the infamous Minus World glitch in 1.2, which allows you to enter an unintended world by preventing the warp zone from loading properly. On standard cartridge versions of the game, this leads to an infinitely looping version of 7-2. In the FTS version, on the other hand, the Minus World is an actual world, and it has a solid 3 levels. Getting to the final castle is the goal in the category. This game on the outside may seem quite simple, but it gets more complex the more you dig into it. Players over the last few decades have completely dissected how the game functions, inside and out. The most important thing is the frame rule system. Instead of tracking every individual frame, Super Mario Bros. Is programmed to check things every 21 frames, or 0.35 seconds. Many people like to picture this as a bus. The two biggest reasons why this is so important for speedrunning is, 1. Every 21 frames, the game checks when to load the next level, so if you save just enough frames to make an earlier frame rule, that's a solid 0.35 seconds of time save. And 2. Enemy patterns. Hammer Bros, Fish, and Bowser all behave differently based on what frame rule you enter the level. Thanks to the frame rule system, individual frames in a speedrun do not factor into the final time until the very final level, 8-4. Thanks to this, players have been able to get the fastest possible time in each level individually, and have gotten closer and closer to doing so in a full run. In more recent years, besides understanding frame rules, players have also been able to shave more time off just by how they finish the end of the level. There was first the discovery of the bullet bill glitch in 8-2, which shaved 2 frame rules off grabbing the flagpole. And then in more recent history, the flagpole glitch, which optimally can save a frame rule in many levels across the game. The speedrun category you probably know the most about is any %, which is quite notable for becoming more and more optimized over the years. Each category, any % included, starts timing on the very first frame the 400 timer appears after selecting one player. Timing ends when all sprites are invisible after hitting the axe in the final castle. Anyways, between harder frame rules being done, and frames in 8-4 always being saved, it's been getting harder and harder to beat this time, but it's definitely still not over yet. At the current time of making this, the any % record is a 454.881 by Nifsky, with the only possible frame rule left to save being a frame rule in 4.2, dubbed Lightning 4.2. This frame rule has been done multiple times now in individual level attempts, and even more recently has been done in a proper run. With a handful of people clamoring to be the next world record holder, and only slivers of time still being available, it's safe to say this time will be beaten eventually, but it won't be easy. With the run already having multiple flagpole glitches, and wall clips, it's not for the faint of heart. With warp lists being 4 times longer than any %, there's a lot more to improve in this category, but the longer length alone makes it equally difficult to optimize. A ton of any % world record holders over the years have also snagged this record, but obviously there's been more than that. This also includes other top players such as GTAce and Jeremy MKW, who have taken records in recent history. With the current record being an 1855.929 by Nifsky, the run already features a more than impressive amount of tricks, stringed back to back, but there's still a bit more to go. Nifsky himself has even spliced a 1939 time, using his best ever individual segments. A human getting that time is very unlikely, but it at least shows the future potential in the category. With Minus World Ending only having 5 levels, it's definitely the most perfected out of the 3, with the only minor time save being in -3. Nifsky currently has the record in this as well, with a 230.319, and plans to eventually get a 230.2. There is quite a bit more to talk about revolving this game specifically, but we will get to that in further layers. No matter what happens to this game in the future, it has cemented its place as one of speedrunning's most impressive feats. It has spawned so many big names over the years, such as Andrew G and Darbian, and in general, has had a constant bubbling community. It's one of the few speedruns that can easily rack up millions of views. There's one more thing I wanted to add here that I forgot about earlier on. In mid-2022, the any % and Warpless leaderboards were separated by NTSC and PAL. Previously, both these versions have been lumped together, with virtually everybody running on the American NTSC version. But what exactly is so special about PAL? Well, if you aren't familiar already, across the pond, 50 Hz is standard for electronic frequencies instead of 60 Hz over here. This in turn also led to games running at 50 frames per second instead of 60. This difference makes quite a lot, with virtually every game playing differently if you were in a PAL region. A lot of developers simply sped up physics or other elements of a game to make up for the frame rate difference. Unfortunately, tweaking minor game elements to appease new frame rates tends to completely change how the game was supposed to be played, or even worse, sometimes breaks it. Super Mario Bros. Is definitely not an exception to this. In PAL versions of the game, you can clip through the floor just by simply hitting the floor with a high fall speed, and it's possible to get a full flagpole glitch in every single level with a flagpole. Humans could hypothetically get a 452 time here, but good luck with that. Simply playing this version is quite hard enough, and adding these tight tricks into it won't help anymore. Currently, the record for any percent is a 505.477 by Mainline, and Warpless has yet to be optimized really, with a record there being a 2050 by Josh Keys. Alright, now I think I'm finally done here. Super Mario Bros. 2 was released in 1986 on the Famicom Disk System, and is the more challenging successor to the original Super Mario Bros. Most people refer to this as the Lost Levels, because that's the name it got once it finally made its way to America. Nintendo of America originally deemed this game too difficult, and instead would release what America knows as Super Mario Bros. 2, but we will get to that game very shortly. The Lost Levels uses a slightly modified version of the original Mario Bros. Engine, with other noticeable things being altered, such as graphics, different enemy mechanics, and the most notable being the way more difficult levels. Due to just the sheer difficulty of the game, this game is not nearly as ran as the original, but it still has quite a history. Similar to the first game, there is also 8 worlds that house 4 levels, but there is even more than that. If you beat the game without warp zones, you will then unlock a World 9, which is then followed up by World A, B, C, and D. Having the same exact timing methods as the original, this sequel has even more speedrun categories compared to Mario 1. First is any percent 8-4, which is the most competitive category by far. The world record holder list when going through its history has quite an overlap with people who have also held the any percent record in Super Mario Bros., with Nifsky currently being at the top with a 751.956. This game shares the same frame rule system as the original, as well as tricks such as wall clips and flagpole glitches. Unlike the first game, there is still more than one frame rule to add into this run. In fact, theoretically, the run could even go below the 750 mark, but that's definitely not happening anytime soon. Nifsky does want to improve this run more than he already has, but time will tell to see by how much. Warpless 8-4 is in a very similar situation to Mario 1 Warpless, with it being a longer gauntlet of tricks, with plenty of possible time saves sprinkled throughout. Cosmic currently has that record with a 21:23, with a time in the 21:1x range being more than possible. There are multiple other categories that all pertain to the letter worlds, the first being both endings, which requires you to first beat 8-4, and then get to and beat D-4 as quickly as you can. Scalpel currently holds that record with a 15:43. Following that, there's all stages, which is playing all the stages. You need to beat worlds 1 through 9, and then A through D. Scalpel tops this category as well, with a 36:21. There's also worlds A through D any percent, and worlds A through D warpless, which entails breezing through all the letter worlds under those specific rules, with Scalpel once again having all those records. In this game you can also choose to play as Luigi, who has slightly altered physics, which leads to tackling levels in completely different ways. This has led to the speedrun leaderboards having a tab for Luigi under every category. A handful of people have claimed those records. Just like the first game, we will revisit this in one layer from now. All I've talked about so far is the original Super Mario Bros. 2. Now we get to what most people in the West call Super Mario Bros. 2. After deeming the Japanese game too difficult, Nintendo of America had something else up its sleeve. The game, Yumi Kujo Doki Doki Panic, was a Famicom Disk System game released in 1987 and was based on the Super Mario Bros. Prototype Nintendo of America deemed too hard. They took it and completely adapted the game to fit the Super Mario style. Being released in 1988, it went on to become one of the best-selling NES titles, and for years, no one in America really knew the true Super Mario Bros. 2 due to a lack of worldwide communication at the time. This title has 7 worlds, housing 3 levels each. besides World 7, which only has 2 for some reason. Each world has its own theme, from slippery and snowy, to deserty and sandy. The player has the option between 4 different characters: Mario, Luigi, Toad, and the Princess. Each character has their own unique physics. This has led to a huge part of speedrun routing coming down to deciding which character is the best for each level. Currently, the any% record held by Cool Kid uses a combination of Toad and Luigi to traverse the game. This 8-minute run features a variety of tricks, such as using a bomb to push you out of bounds while climbing to a different section of the level, traveling in a carpet faster than intended, and climbing above the screen without activating a new room. With character selection being a thing, there are also 4 other any% categories that all require using only one specific character throughout the entire run. All of these records sit in the upper 8-minute range, with the fastest being 30 seconds slower than normal any%. Lastly, there is all levels, which is the warpless equivalent in this game. Each single character ends up getting utilized among the 7 worlds. Every category I've just talked about is currently dominated by Cool Kid, who has quite a prevalent name across many speed games. Not sure if you're seeing a pattern with these first few games, but we will touch upon this game later as well. Getting back to more proper Mario platformers, we have the final installment of the NES trilogy, released in 1998 in Japan and 1990 in America. This title added a handful of standards that would become associated with Mario ever since. There's a proper world map to navigate between levels, 7 Koopa Links sitting at the end of each kingdom, and the ability to fly thanks to the Super Leaf power-up. Thanks to there being a proper world map now, you weren't required to beat every single level in the worlds that you had to beat. This led to there being 3 traditional categories instead of the 2 in the previous games. The longest is 100%, which entails beating every level on each map, as well as the Hammer Bros chilling on the overworld. With there being 90 total levels, the record nowadays clocks in at a 109.38 by Mitch Flowerpower, who is a veteran of the game. He year by year has been able to maintain his position across multiple categories. That leads us to any% warpless, which Mitch still also dominates. But actually, there are 2 important things I should probably explain before we move forward. The first is hands. In the middle of World 8, there is a section with 5 different tiles that have a 50% chance of a hand pulling you down. That means overall, there's only a 12.5% chance that none of the hands pull you down. So even if you have a perfect run, these hands can completely kill it. The second is Hammer Bro patterns. You may notice on the overworld, they move a seemingly random amount of times. Since you can't move while the Hammer Bros are moving, that means that the less they move, the faster your run will be. There are certain ways to manipulate these bros at different times, but no matter what, they're really never your best friend. Back to warpless, this run entails beating the game as quickly as possible, without any wrong warps or warp whistles. It's still a hefty run, with top times being in the 50-minute range. Both categories I've talked about feature a wide array of movements and tricks, with the most infamous being wall clips that are known to sometimes kill runs if they don't go your way. The last traditional category is any% no wrong warp, which is beating the game as fast as possible without wrong warping. You may wonder how you'd be able to wrong warp, and I'll answer that in just a moment. In this run, you collect a warp whistle in both 1-3 and the first fort. You then can warp all the way to World 8 and traverse through all its airships and everything in between. This run now sits at a 1041, which currently is also held by Mitch. The craziest trick that is now done in runs is in the very final castle. You have to enter the very first door, instantly go for a wall jump, and then wall clip. Imagine doing that at the very end of a run. With constant resets between Hammer Bros, hands, and general movement, this is quite a tight run. Lastly, there is any%. Around 2014, it was discovered thanks to arbitrary code execution that it was possible to trick the game into ending in 7-1. This caused what was the previously named any% to be renamed to any% no wrong warp, with any% now involving this glitch to the credits. With some of the earliest runs being in the 4-minute range, the record now sits at a 302.2 by Kudo1K. This run is a reset city. You can see on Kudo's attempt counter that he had already racked up close to 5,000 runs. A majority of those resets will either come from bad Hammer Bro movements in World 1, or simply messing up a part of the code execution. With this run becoming more and more ridiculous, one simple input could kill the record. What sucks is once you perform the code execution, the run isn't over yet. With the last 20 to 30 seconds of the run being scrolling garbage, you have to wait for the game to load the ending cutscene, and the time of this load can vary quite a lot. I've even seen debates off and on about when timing for this category should end, but that's a completely different can of worms. That's not my job to talk about. Super Mario Land, the first ever portable Mario title released in 1989, becoming the second best ever selling Game Boy title, right after the juggernaut that was Tetris. With the Game Boy being a way more basic system on the technical side of things, this game was also just as simplistic, having only 12 levels. There isn't much in terms of tricks in this game, but there is one in auto-scrollers, where you can wrap yourself around the other side of the screen, and end the level early. The other most notable thing is the bonus game at the end of each world. Depending on where you are in the run, you'll either want the power-up, or just simply one life. With very few levels, you can easily beat the game in 12 minutes. Earlier last year, I made a world record history in this game if you want to check it out. I will give you a warning that my narration and audio was not nearly as good back then, but hey, it's still a good watch. There's also a normal plus hard mode category, which requires playing the standard game, and then afterwards beating the game a second time on a hard mode, which features more enemies that unlocks after completing the game. Entering the 16-bit generation, one of the launch titles for the Super Nintendo in 1990 was Super Mario World. Between 9 different worlds, the game has 72 levels, with there being 24 secret exits. The biggest addition in this game was the appearance of Yoshi, which is something Nintendo had wanted to do on the NES, but quit due to hardware limitations. The newest power-up this time was the cape, which is similar to the leaf in Mario 3, but the cape allowed you to not just spin fly, but also cape pump. This meant you could fly over an entire level without coming back down. This obviously became quite a broken mechanic, and moving over to speedruns, you'll see that plenty. For over a solid decade now, timing has started on the first frame Mario appears in the intro cutscene. To make this easy, players type -2.20 into their timer, and start it at the exact same time they select one player. At the other end, the final time of the run ends the first frame Peach appears after beating Bowser. Timings aside, due to the great amount of worlds and secret exits throughout the game, a huge selection of categories have been formed over the years. The 3 earliest and most notable being 96 Exit, No Star World, and 11 Exit. 96 Exit is pretty self-explanatory, with the requirement being to beat every level and every exit. Thanks to more and more tricks being discovered over the years, this time currently sits towards the low 1 hour and 21 minute range. For context, when I first started running this 7 years ago, the record was still a higher 123. Things really do change. Oh yeah, tricks. Before we move forward, we should probably brush over all the kind of glitches done in runs. This game is debatably the most broken Mario game to date, and while I'd love to go more in depth with some of these tricks and explain even more little things throughout the game, I don't have the time, so if you want to hear more, I definitely recommend hopping over to Retro Game Mechanics Explained, who has torn this game apart time and time again, and made some great videos explaining everything you probably would like to know. I'll link specific videos down below. Anyways, the most important glitches you need to know about are any that involve ending the level quicker than intended. The first is the orb glitch, which is possible by swallowing a chuck with a Yoshi. The reason that this gives you an item is because while chucks were never meant to be swallowed, they are programmed as power-ups. So just like you get a mushroom if you collected it with Yoshi's tongue, you'll also collect whatever power-up the chuck is when you collect it too. This orb functions exactly the same as the orb at the bottom of Sunken Ghost Ship, which instantly completes the level. In speedruns, this is primarily used in 11 Exit, where it is activated to save over 10 seconds in Iggy's castle. Due to how easily this could be abused over and over again in longer categories, it has been banned in every other main leaderboard category outside of 11 Exit. Secondly, there's wings. In multiple levels throughout the game, there are question mark blocks that when hit, spawn wings and can be collected to instantly end the level if you are riding a Yoshi. Through a discovery of block duplication, it was found that when doing this with a Dragon Coin and then collecting it, wings would spawn once duplicating the block once again. That's not the only way that this has been achieved. P-balloon blocks can also be duplicated to spawn unintended Yoshi wings. This has led to multiple levels throughout the game being beaten way earlier than intended, thanks to a bunch of block duplications. Lastly, the other level end glitch you should probably know about is boss kills. I'm going to oversimplify this majorly, but by combining a couple glitches, the spray connected to the Koopa Kid bosses throughout the game can be invisibly spawned to beat levels way quicker than intended. Again, this is a very basic summary of what really goes on, but let's just get to the actual categories. In 96 Exit, the last two tricks mentioned are abused many times throughout the run, and have been a huge part of why the time has come down so much over the years. Before moving forward, one interesting tidbit surrounding the category is the route people have done over the last decade. In the early 2010s, it was quite common for runners to use a route that was dubbed Early Green Switch, which unlocks the Green Switch Palace as early as possible. This increases the amount of Green Switch blocks throughout the run, which is quite useful since they all give you a cape power-up. The next commonly used route that sprung up in the mid-2010s was the Early Wings route, with its intention being to go to Vanilla Dome 1 as quickly as possible, and then also follow that with a clip done underwater in Vanilla Dome 2, where you use a Yoshi to get out of bounds. While I'm talking about this kind of clip is also done in Force of Illusion 2, which is featured in most categories. The route that a majority of runners go with nowadays is the Early Ghost House route, which makes you beat both exits in Donut Secret House during your first trip through World 2. The benefit from this stems from boomerang positions. Whenever you play a level and enter a room with boomerangs present, whatever position they are in after getting past them will be saved for the next time you encounter a boomerang. This is saved across the entire game, and not just a single ghost house. The boomerang position in Donut Secret House is the most important during the run, since you have to actually maneuver through them, and if you decide to play this ghost house first, they will always be in the same default position. This is a lot more ideal than wondering how the boomerang positions will be after Special World. There is also a fourth talked about route dubbed a Kisto route, which is designed around getting Yoshi clips and Force of Illusion out of the way as quickly as possible, but it's not really in the conversation nowadays because it was mostly only used by the runner it was named after, Akisto. It does have its uses, but top runners are currently not using it. It's hard to tell what the future for a category like this is, but things have definitely gotten spicier over the last year alone. Probably the craziest thing that is done on the record now is a newer variant of the sandbar clip in Valley of Bowser 2. Instead of doing just a 2-frame trick to clip into the sandbar and save a cycle, now a shell is grabbed to duplicate the Yoshi wing block and spawn a key. This key is used to clip back in the sandbar multiple times, which to do at the end of an already intense run is honestly mind-boggling. There's still some more potential glitches to add in the future that runners have yet to incorporate in actual runs. Two possibilities are first, a wall clip in Forest Ghost House, and second, causing a Switch Palace activation in Chocolate Island 2. I don't expect either of those to be properly attempted in runs for quite a bit, but it's cool knowing what's possible. Let's switch over to the most popular middle category, which is No Star World. This requires beating the game as fast as possible without entering Star World. This is the warpless equivalent of the game, and similar to 96 Exit, an increase in glitches and tip-top strategies have lowered this time all the way to a 32:28. Going back 5 years, the record was roughly 30 seconds slower. Before moving on to the third most known category, I should probably talk about a second warpless category in the game, which has increased in popularity over the last few years. In the early 2010s, when racing on speedruns live was quite common, a lot of joke categories that weren't on the main leaderboard were played, and one of them was All Castles. This has the same goal in mind as No Star World, except you also have to beat every castle. In 2016, some people properly picked up the category, and was established as a proper main leaderboard category too. Alongside this, one of Super Mario World's annual speedrun tournaments that year was All Castles, which majorly helped increase the run count for a category that was virtually unknown before. Over the years, many have preferred this run over No Star World due to it having a lot more variety. No Star World, infamously halfway through, has the top half of Butterbridge, which has multiple flyovers, and a 2-minute auto-scroller. On the other hand, All Castles features the right side of World 3, which involves Wings, and Vanilla Dome 3, which has a variety of strats depending on your skill level. In 2021, the first ever 33-minute time was achieved, and currently the record sits at a 33:55. Finally moving over to 11 Exit, this is the traditional any percent category that uses Star World to get to Bowser as quickly as possible. Nowadays, you may notice this is split into 3 subcategories: Cloud, Orb, and Glitchless. Glitchless is pretty self-explanatory. The Orb glitch I talked about earlier is banned, and the only tricks allowed are Stair Clip in Donut Ghost House, and Zips in Star World 1. There definitely is a debate if these are glitches or not, but for these rule sets, they have been heavily dubbed more closer to exploits, so for this case, runners can still go for them in glitchless runs. The orb category, on the other hand, well, uses orb. After collecting the orb in Yoshi's Island 1, you die as quickly as possible, and then use the orb to skip the rest of Iggy's castle. The final category, Cloud, uses another Chuck item swap, but this time in Yoshi's Island 2. With the right setup, this swap gives you the same cloud that Lakitu sits in. So what's so useful about this? Well, some nerds found out that you could use this in the Bowser fight to skip his animations. You can do that by being on the left side of the screen and jumping off the side with the cloud. This has led to the cloud category being a solid 40 seconds faster than orb. Don't be fooled though, it's not as easy as simply jumping on the side of the screen. Quite a lot can go wrong, and it doesn't help that it's the very last thing you have to do after making your way through the entire game. Talking about category names, there was a point in time where 11 exit was simply called any %, but why is that not still the case? Well, first of all, Super Mario World doesn't use any percentages. The save files use the exit counter, but even more importantly, in 2014 it was discovered that you could skip right to the credits as early as Yoshi's Island 2. This was done thanks to a ton of arbitrary code execution, or ACE. Jeff W. was the first ever person to do this, and Sethling was the first to prove it was possible on real hardware. Ever since then, the record has been lowered time and time again, with loads of different routes being implemented. Many of them use multi-tap accessories that allow more than 2 controllers to be plugged in. While the name off and on has been debated, it has mostly been named Zero Exit, since optimally you don't need to beat a single level to reach the credits. This is also why the previous any % became 11 exit, since the minimum amount of levels you need to beat by warping through Star World is 11. For the past couple years, the record has sat very close to the 40-second mark by Furious, and I wouldn't be shocked if this record sat for quite a bit more. This 40-second run has been optimized quite a lot. You may think I brushed over every serious category in the game, but surprisingly I haven't even talked about half the total amount of categories on the main leaderboard, at least at this current moment. It has changed a bit. There are currently multiple small-only and no-cape variants of the more popular categories on the board. For example, there's 95 exit no cape, which is 96 exit without grabbing a cape. The one exit that isn't possible capeless is the Donut Ghost House exit that unlocks Top Secret Area. That category currently sits in the low 126 range. Secondly, there's No Cape No Star World, which should be pretty self-explanatory. This has become one of the more popular no cape categories due to it being medium in run length, and also being picked as the category of choice for tournaments. Of course, if 96 and No Star World have no cape variants, 11 exit has to as well. Just like how normal 11 exit has Cloud, Orb, and Glitchless, 11 no cape also has this too. Due to no cape already being hard enough, Glitchless is the most popular by far, with Cloud and Orb not being nearly as popular as they are under the cape variants. Moving forward, Small Only is a completely separate beast. Small Only is the 11 exit equivalent without grabbing any power-ups. Due to Star World 1 needing a mushroom to be completed, this route instead beats World 2, and then enters the Star Warp from Vanilla Secret 1. This run features many impressive tricks, with the biggest by far being a required shell jump to reach the secret exit in Star World 4. This category has quite a weird history with 2 of its record holders, including the current one as of now, so that's kinda weird, completely deleting their run history. So have fun making a proper world record progression. Going to the opposite end, there is also Lunar Dragon, which is 96 exit, but also grabbing at least 5 dragon coins and levels that have them, as well as the moon in every world. The reason why you need to collect at least 5, because that's how many you need to get a 1-up. When this category was first made, glitches were banned, with the intent of it being to make the player completely explore the game. This rule over the years has been grandfathered into the boards, and it took until the 2020s for a proper glitch subcategory to exist. Due to how little love the category gets nowadays as a whole, the glitches category has been barely run, with the glitchless record funny enough being the fastest on both boards. To cap things off, more recently 3 other small-only / no-cape variants were added to even out the boards. All Castles no-cape, All Castles small-only, and No Star World small-only. It's been debated a bit if these runs should even be on the main board, since they were on the category extensions originally, but nonetheless, there are a handful of runners under each board. And there we go. That's every main category in Super Mario World, but that definitely won't be the last of this game in this series. Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, the more ambitious sequel to Super Mario Land. Being released in 1992, 3 years later, virtually everyone will agree that this game completely towers over its predecessor in every single way. With the original game only having 12 levels, this time we get 32 stages across 6 different zones, each with their own unique theme. What's cool as well is that you can play these zones in any order you want. This has led to the speedrun route over the years, changing back and forth. The usual mushroom, fire flower, and star abilities are back, but this time we also have a carrot, which turns Mario into a bunny. This gives Mario bunny ears, which allows him to jump higher and maintain that height. Looking at the top runs of the last few years, the route runners go for does vary quite a bit, but the latest record goes for Tree Zone, Space Zone, Macro Zone, Pumpkin Zone, Turtle Zone, and then finally Mario Zone. An interesting thing about this game is that sometimes it's a good thing to take damage. With taking hits not being as brutal in this run, there are multiple places throughout the game where damage boosting can save you time. One of the most interesting and notable tricks in the run is at the very end of Wario's castle. Based on what time you scroll the screen here in the castle, you can get a faster second Wario phase. Your goal here is to optimally scroll right, when the timer's last digit is divisible by 4. Technically the timer is not what gives you these better phases, but instead is related to a game check every 8 frames to see if Mario is within 32 pixels of the X position of Wario. If this is indeed the case, Wario will stop and give you a better phase. Having an optimal phase 1 allows you to mostly line up with the desired last timer digits you want. Older runners of the game originally thought this was luck, until the discoveries I briefly described. I have also made a world record history for the standard any% glitchless record category if you want to check out everything in the game more in detail. So there's an any% glitchless, but what about any%? Well, just like Super Mario Bros. 3 and World, a credits warp also exists here. This credits warp is unique, with the second half of the run requiring the player to navigate through visual garbage, which is a representation of the game's storage. This record has been optimized multiple times, with the record currently clocking in at 2 minutes and 34 seconds. There's surprisingly a handful of lesser known categories on the official boards that I will briefly describe. All levels is the most prevalent of the bunch, with the name being quite self-explanatory. Glitches are not allowed, with top times being in the 38-minute range. Small Mario also tells you everything you need to know, with the record being 2 minutes slower than the standard glitchless run. Jackpot entails playing the slot machine game, with the goal achieving a 99 up that awards you 99 lives. 999 coins, no level repeat, well, requires you to get 999 coins without repeating the same level over again. Who would have guessed? Beat Wario is similar to any% glitchless, except glitches are allowed, which makes the category closer to 2 minutes faster. One button requires beating the game by using only one of the face buttons during the entire run without using glitches. This basically means any% glitchless, no running. Pacifist is any% glitchless without killing a single enemy, besides any bosses that are required to progress forward. Low% no coins is beating the game without collecting any coins. The category allows you to collect coins due to certain coins being unavoidable, and for each coin you collect, you add a 10-second penalty to your final time. Glitchless 2-player 1 controller is the same as normal any% glitchless, but sharing a controller between 2 players. And there we go. All the categories are done. Hope that was enough for you. Quite a lot for a game that isn't always in the general conversation. Super Mario 64. In 1996, we got Mario's iconic first ever transition into 3D, which is still heavily praised today. The game debatably has the largest speedrun community out of any Mario game, and for good reason. With Mario moving into the third dimension, the possibilities for speedrun tech became endless. Instead of just jumping and flying, Mario could now also ground pound and wall kick. With 120 different stars in total to collect, there are 2 traditional ways people have beaten the game. Collecting 70 stars to enter the final Bowser fight, or taking the long way and collecting every single star possible. In regards to speedruns, timing for this game is a bit different, with time starting on console power on, unlike most other games that start either on game select or when Mario appears. Moving on to discoveries, there's quite a lot to sift through, such as clipping through doors and BLJs, or backwards long jumps. These tricks have allowed 3 new categories to spawn that have become heavily contested over the years. The most popular is 16 star, which skips the door that normally requires 30 stars. Through the use of MIPS, getting through this door becomes very possible. After grabbing the second key and Bowser in the Fire Sea, it's time to make your way up the stairs. With 2 BLJs, you can get right to the final Bowser. This record currently sits at a 1448 by Luigi, but this record has been heavily traded even in recent times, so I wouldn't be shocked if it's sooner than later that it's already beaten. Before moving on to other categories, there's 2 big things I should probably mention that are relevant to the entire game. Normally when starting the game for the first time, Lakitu floats in front of you once you arrive to the castle bridge. It's surprisingly easy to skip this by jumping across the very sides of the bridge. It's faster to do this on the left side, and saves roughly 8 seconds. The second trick is LBLJ, or Lobby Backwards Long Jump. This refers to a BLJ done in the lobby of the castle, which has different uses in different categories. In high-level 120 star runs, this is used to avoid visiting Bomb-On Battlefield for the second time, and it saves roughly 10 seconds. In 16 star, this is used to avoid collecting the stars in the lobby of the castle, due to the stars in the basement being faster to collect overall. This can save upwards of 30 seconds. Getting back to categories, there's still 2 more to talk about. An LBLJ is a huge factor in why they can even exist. In both 0 and 1 star, the trick is used in order to skip the 8 star door typically required. After grabbing the first key, an SBLJ, or Side Backwards Long Jump, is performed to enter Dire Docks. After collecting the other key and Bowser in the Fire Sea, it's time to do the BLJs like in 16 star. And boom, you can beat the game with only 1 star. At the moment, Kano has this record with a 7 minute and 7 second time. 0 star has the same beginning as 1 star, but when performing the SBLJ to enter Dire Docks, you instead go to the left of this pole, and try to control your speed so that it totals over 400. You then need to touch the ground, and hold left to be able to read the text from the star door. After the text, you can use your speed to completely bypass the Dire Docks loading zone. This allows you to immediately grab the second key, and ultimately beat the game without a single star collection. Briefly going back to longer categories, 70 star clocks in at just under 47 minutes, and 120 star being just a bit under an hour and 38 minutes. Over the years, there have been major grinds to break the next minute barrier in 120 star. With it being such a long category, with so many more potential strategies and time saves, the record has traded back and forth, with many of the top runners sticking around for years upon years, such as Cheese, Punkation, and Simply. One tiny tidbit before moving on, is that each category is also divided by platform: N64, Virtual Console, and Emulator. The biggest reason for this is due to how the game handles lag on each platform. Due to the original hardware having way more lag in certain places, there are completely different strategies done to avoid said lag. It changes runs quite a lot, enough to make the run completely different in certain places. While the heaviest competition does happen on console, there are plenty of players under every category. Following Super Mario 64's footsteps, Super Mario Sunshine is the second 3D Mario platformer released in 2002. Taking place in Isle Delfino, Mario and friends are on a vacation. Well, at least until Shadow Mario appears. He ends up trashing the entire island, which leads Mario to being mistakenly convicted in the process. Mario is demanded to clean up the mess, which can be done thanks to the help of the Flash Liquidizer Ultra Dowsing Device, or FLUDD for short. Super Mario Sunshine has a total of 8 different categories, spanning a wide array of lengths. The game has a total of 120 shines. Shines can be collected by clearing specific missions across multiple worlds. These missions are called episodes, with each arena having 8 of them, besides the final Corona Mountain, where you battle Bowser. Starting with the most common run, any %, you are simply required to unlock the final boss, which happens after beating Episode 7 across 7 worlds. This typically leads you to collecting 44 shines. Shines can be collected in the intended order, but this is speedrunning we're talking about. There are plenty of skips throughout the game. One of the guides, linked on Super Mario Sunshine's speedrun page, says there's 5 notable skips that can be in any %. And going down the list, there's a skip as early as the first world, Bianco Hills, where you can skip the Bianco 1 shine. Secondly, Gelato Beach Skip entails collecting the Gelato 8 shine while being in Episode 1. which lets you access episode 7 afterwards. This leads to the episode order simply being 7 through 8, and saves roughly 12 minutes. Typically played at the end of the game, Pianta Village can be entered at any time by climbing up to its entrance without the use of a rocket or Yoshi. You'll see that the any % record enters Pianta Village 20 minutes into the run. In Pianta 5, Yoshi is normally required to complete the stage, but can be done without him. Lastly, Pinna 5 is typically skipped by instead entering Pinna 6 Secret by using an earlier episode. This has to be done after Pinna 4 due to abusing a Yoshi to achieve this. With all that said, the record currently sits at a 1:13:30 by JJSRL. And while I'm talking about times, I should probably briefly mention a rule change that has happened in more recent times. When starting up the game, the intro is quite long, with a majority of it being cutscenes. Without modifying the game, there is no way to skip this. By the time the real game starts, the run is already around 7 minutes. Many people have had different opinions on it, but over the years, many have explained their frustration of waiting multiple minutes for cutscenes to stop, get into the real run, and then not too far in, mess up, requiring them to reset and once again endure minutes of cutscenes. In early 2020, there was a vote regarding leaderboard timing methods, and ultimately what won was including 2 new methods to play the game, Peach File and Hacked File. Peach File is a file made from saving right after Flood's tutorial cutscene on the airstrip. If using this, you have to add 2 minutes and 30 seconds to your timer to make up for the cutscenes you ultimately skip over. Hacked File is, well, a hacked file that you can download and install using Wii Homebrew to make the game skip all the cutscenes. In this case, you have to add 5 minutes and 40 seconds to make up for the time for every cutscene. These 2 file methods have become pretty popular, with a majority of runners switching to these due to the ability to grind more runs without waiting as long. These file methods are allowed for a majority of categories, and we'll get to the exception pretty shortly. Moving to 120 shines, it's the 100% equivalent in the game, requiring 96 physical shines, plus 240 blue coins, and then collecting the final shine at Bowser. Being beefier than any %, the record currently clocks in at a 253.57 by SB runs. While we are still here, I definitely recommend AverageTrey's videos on the history of both any % and 120 shines. That'll be linked below. Moving down the list, there's 96 shines, which requires just collecting the 96 physical shines I mentioned before, and that record sits around the 2 hour and 30 minute mark by Cited Williams. 79 shines is 96 shines minus the 17 shines in the Delfino hub world, clocking in slightly shorter, with SP runs having a 219 there. All blue coins involves collecting and trading in all 240 blue coins throughout the game, and then defeating Bowser in Corona Mountain. This ultimately clocks in at 68 shines. Nanashi tops this board with a 152.42. 20 shines simply requires collecting 20 shines as quickly as possible. In this category, instead of using Peach or Hacked File, Race File must be used, which is obtained by playing the game until reaching the Delfino Plaza court cutscene, and then saving and quitting. Time ends the second your shine counter displays 20. This is the shortest category of the bunch by far, with Nanashi having an 18.15. Any % hoverless is any %, but hoverless. This means you cannot use the hover nozzle throughout the entire run, which changes things up quite a lot. This record is 3.5 minutes slower than the normal any %, with Nanashi having a 1:17:10. The final category, All Episodes, revolves collecting every shine that can be obtained by completing episodes across each game world. This leads to 58 shines in total. Nanashi has this record as well, having a 138.21. While any % and 120 shines are the 2 mainly talked about categories, it's cool to see a wide array of goals that end in lengths between those 2. 2006. 14 years after the last portable and side-scrolling platformer Mario title, New Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo DS would become the first entry in the New Super Mario Bros. Sub-series. Being the best-selling game on the handheld, many people consider this entry a blast back to the original titles in many ways. Spanning 8 worlds and 80 total levels, Mario needs to defeat both Bowser Jr. and his father in order to save Princess Peach. There are 3 new exciting power-ups this time around, with the first one, the Mega Mushroom, being featured right on the cover. When collected, it allows Mario to crush virtually anything in his path. Warp pipes, enemies, and even flagpoles, believe it or not. On the opposite end, there's the mini mushroom, which causes Mario to shrink. This leads to extra jump height, running on water, and being able to get through smaller entrances easier. The final new power-up is what is the most relevant when it comes to speedrunning, the blue shell. This allows you to swim faster, as well as perform a dash attack that allows you to brush past nearly everything. This blue shell is so powerful, in fact, that speedrunners for a while have been trying their best to find a consistent way to collect the power-up as early as possible. You see, throughout the game, you can encounter red flying question mark blocks in the overworld, and when you enter a level with said block flying above it, you can obtain a power-up from the block. One of the 5 randomly picked power-ups that can be collected from it is a blue shell. The blue shell is quite important in the eyes of speedrunning. Besides the huge advantages I talked about before, the secret exit used in the any % category requires a blue shell, so if you could simply grab this blue shell from the block, instead of having to go to the Toad House, this can save a solid 15 seconds. In World 1, 2 of these blocks fly around level to level, and they have been deemed over the years to be seemingly random. Well, eventually, it was discovered that a few different things in the game can factor the RNG. Those few things are your DS's MAC address, date and time, and finally, how many times you double jump in 1-1. Yes, that sounds really weird, but all 3 of these things actually affect randomness in the game. First, a MAC address is an alphanumeric string that is unique to every single electronic device. Since every system has a unique address, this unfortunately means finding a setup is different for each player. Fortunately, the next 2 things can be used to figure out what does work. There is an entire video that does a very good job covering this, but I'll do my best to summarize. Players have to consistently both set the same system date and start up the game, and note how the toads are grouped on the intro cutscene. Yes, these toads do vary. While playing 1-1, they need to keep note of how many double jumps they performed, and then they see if they get a blue shell block in 1-2. This is basically a case of trial and error until a player can find a specific setup that works on their system. Basically, before every attempt, players must set their date, as well as start and play the game exactly in the same way, in order to consistently get this blue shell. The last thing to note about this manipulation is that there's a huge advantage to anyone running on the Wii U Virtual Console version, or on emulator. It's quite easy to speed up this process by making a save state that they can reload over and over again once the runner has found a setup. Moving on to the actual categories, the route for any % uses 2 cannons unlocked from secret exits to warp from World 1 to 5, and then 5 to 8. Top runs use the blue shell until World 8. Damage is intentionally taken to lose the power-up, and eventually, depending on where the runner prefers, switches to a fire flower. This is because the maximum speed you can move in a shell is actually slightly slower than normal. To round off World 8, there's 2 pretty huge tricks. The first in 8 Tower 2, where runners skip ahead past what is virtually an auto-scroller and take damage. They end up dying just after they collect the checkpoint. This resets both Mario and the block snake used in the level. Ultimately, this can save around 5 to 10 seconds. The last trick is in the very last part of the game, where players can skip Bowser by jumping off Bowser Jr.'s head. It's pretty straightforward and has been done in records as early as 2006. The record has been traded so many times over the years, with Spicy Noodles and Glitchman24 being the 2 that do this in most recent times. Connor01 has a great video on the history of this run, if you are inclined to check this out more, link below. The current record from Glitchman is a 22:18, which was done while making this project. With the huge activity in the game recently, I definitely see this getting lowered sooner than later. One thing to note before briefly talking about the rest of the categories is different platforms and load times. You may see that there are official releases and emulator tabs under every category. Official releases allows runs on any DS and 3DS, as well as the Wii U Virtual Console release. The reason for the time with and without loads column is due to the Virtual Console and emulator runs having faster load times, which can add upwards of 40 to 50 seconds of time save throughout the run. Getting to other categories, Cannonless is the warpless equivalent in the game, with the use of warp cannons being banned. Similar to any %, Glitchman and Spicy Noodles have been bouncing records back and forth, with Glitchman currently being at the top, with a 4409. 100% requires beating every level and secret passage, as well as collecting and spending all 240 star coins. Assuming you did all this, you will see 3 stars on the file selection screen. Due to the higher demands for this run, it's a lot less competitive than the previous 2. There's been 2 improvements to the record over the last couple of years, with the last improvement of 2:26:01 by Pidgey being a minute and 40 seconds better over the previous time. Remember that name, because he will come back later. Besides the 3 expected game completion categories, there are 3 other category objectives. The first being no power-ups, which is pretty self-explanatory. The record is over 7 minutes slower than any percent, with Glitchman having a 29:47. The name of the no secret exits category is just as telling, with Glitchman having another record, clocking in at 57:42. Lastly, there's all levels, and you may wonder what this is, since 100% is already a thing. Well, this requires just beating all 80 levels in the game. Collecting and spending the star coins is not required. Spicy Noodles has the best time here, with a 1:43:11. Like I briefly said before, there's been quite a lot of activity here in recent months, so I would keep your eyes peeled. In 2007, we got the first of 3 Mario platformers released on the juggernaut that was the Wii. Super Mario Galaxy takes a break from the normal Mushroom Kingdom, and instead requires the player to tread through galaxies and planets. Besides being another 3D entry, with the Wii Remote and Nunchuck now being the controller, motion and pointer controls were now mixed into the equation. For example, you can collect star bits by pointing around the screen, or tilting the remote to stay afloat on top of balls. On top of this, a wide array of power-ups are available, including the Boo, Bee, and Spring Mushrooms, as well as Ice and Fire Flowers. Being the longest any percent requirement yet, Bowser's Galaxy Reactor at the end of the game requires at least 60 stars to enter. With the star you get from defeating Bowser, this totals to 61 required stars to collect. While movement is obviously important in any game, I would debate that the Galaxy games are some of the most movement heavy of the series. I could probably make a long video out of every single trick I've seen listed relating to movement. Just knowing how to best utilize basic movement, such as long jumps and wall jumps, will save you so much time throughout the run. There's so many little tricks you can use to your advantage, such as a homing attack that can be done by jumping and spin attacking in midair, and ground pounding out of a long jump by doing precise inputs. I'm definitely not the best person to describe every little detail behind these really impressive runs, so if you want to know more, I will link a 200-page Super Mario Galaxy speedrun tutorial in the description. At the very least, I'll briefly describe each category and go into minor detail about the different requirements for the game. Let's first talk about a couple options on the leaderboard. First of all, there is an option under any percent and 120 stars for Mario and Luigi. After completing 120 stars in the game as Mario, you have the option to play as the other Mario brother. Luigi has a handful of differences, such as being able to jump higher, run faster, and having a shorter jump distance. You'll also see a variable name next to each category labeled Co-Star. What is this? Well, Co-Star mode is the 2-player option in the game, where you can connect a second Wii Remote that can gather star bits, shoot at enemies, make Mario jump, and prevent enemies from moving. If both players jump at the same time, the height of Mario's jump can also increase. Runners have attached both controllers together in runs to be able to take advantage of this new movement. These runs are lumped together with 1-controller runs, with top times being achieved on either side. Every record now does take advantage of this though, due to how much time it can save. It's important to note that using this 2-remote method is only allowed in single-player runs, and it doesn't mean you can submit a co-op completion. Lastly, there are some version differences. It has been found that the Japanese version of the game can be a solid 50 seconds faster than a European or American disc. It doesn't end there though. Starting in 2015, a handful of Wii games were put on the Virtual Console as downloads on the Wii U eShop. Due to Virtual Console not needing a disc to load, these versions are even faster, with the fastest version of course being the Japanese one. Well, at least for the original release. I won't say any more about that because we will circle around to this in the next part, but anyways, it ultimately saves over 2 minutes versus an English language disc. I should also say that these time comparisons are just for any percent, and that time save doubles if you are running 120 stars. Oh yeah, let's get back to the categories. I mentioned before that any percent is getting to Bowser's Galaxy Reactor as quickly as possible. Running even the fastest completion of this game is no joke, with the record being 2 hours, 24 minutes, and 37 seconds, currently held by XC Rockin'. The Luigi variant is close to 8 minutes faster, with Jay holding a 2 hour, 16 minute, and 54 second time. There's also a great any percent Luigi record history by DJ Mario Bros. If you're further interested in the category, link below. 120 stars is the 100% equivalent in the game, requiring every star you can obtain. This more than doubles the any percent time, with Jay having a 5:22:49 with Mario, and a 5:12:32 with Luigi. If this wasn't enough, there is still one more ultimate category, 242 stars. Being this game's 100%, it requires 120 stars as both Mario and Luigi, as well as collecting a bonus star using each of them that only unlocks after getting all 120 stars of both characters. This record is also held by Jay, which took him 11 hours, 11 minutes, and 22 seconds. Shame he didn't save 11 more seconds for the ultimate time. I have one last interesting tidbit before moving on. You may notice a rule that says, manipulating your Wii save data to skip the save text box is banned. All the way back in 2013, top Mario speedrunner Darbian made a forum post figuring out that if you completely fill up your Wii's system memory and get past the Wii's warnings by entering in maintenance mode, you can start up the game, and playing it will skip the save dialogue completely. Due to both the trick on its own being crazy enough, as well as the runs already being demanding so much, this was promptly banned when it was rediscovered once again in 2020. New Super Mario Bros. Wii. Being the second overall, and first console entry in the New Super Mario Bros. Series, the games went back to the more traditional route in 2009, with 2D platforming across the Mushroom Kingdom. A huge selling point of this game was being able to play with up to 4 players, who could play as Mario, Luigi, and 2 different colored Toads. The coolest power-up on the block this time is a propeller mushroom that allows you to gain height if you shake the Wii remote. This title has 8 worlds, with a bonus 9th world unlocking if you beat World 8. The world has 8 levels, with each individually unlocking once you collect all the star coins and the corresponding world number. In the same fashion as the DS game, there are cannons in the game that allow you to skip multiple worlds, leading to the exact same world route as the original title, 1, 5, and then 8. In World 5, things get really interesting, with there being 2 different levels you can pick between after dealing with a piranha plant. Top runners go for 5-3, but 5-2 is an option if a player prefers it. In 5-4, the level is virtually an auto-scroller, with a platform riding purple goop. Enemies are constantly dropping from the ceiling, and the platform will stop moving if too many enemies are riding it. People have discovered that by using the propeller power-up, that you can clear the entire level without riding this platform. They use both the walls and platforms at the top, as well as some blocks to make their way above the Kool-Aid pit of death. The propeller power-up can help skip many other sections of the game. One of the most notable sections besides 5-4 is the World 8 airship, where you can skip multiple sections where you are supposed to twist gears to move the platforms. When watching the end of a top run at any percent, you may notice that the time is different than what the record is actually labeled as. This is because any time under 25 minutes is also calculated without load times, and is ranked using so. This is due to times varying a lot from Wii disc loads. There's easily proof of that with a couple of top 10 times including loads, being faster than the record held by Pidgey, which is a 22:08 once you remove all the loads. Just like the DS, there is a similar cannonless category which bans all warp cannons, and increases the runtime by quite a lot. Pidgey's record is over an hour and a half. 100% requires getting 5 stars on the file select screen, which requires beating every normal and secret goal, using all the warp cannons, and getting all the star coins from worlds 1 through 9. This is the longest category in the game by far, with Pidgey having a 2 hour and 58 minute time. Any percent no World 5 summarizes the rules pretty well in just the name, and is a nice middle category between standard any percent and cannonless. If you couldn't tell by now, there's one person who has heavily dominated this game in recent times, with Pidgey also having this record at 45 minutes and 44 seconds. Low percent is the game's any percent small only category, which bans all power-ups, checkpoints, and Yoshi. As early as World 1, the run has a heavier challenge. The 1-3 secret exit requires a shell jump. In World 5, this run goes into 5-2 instead of 5-3, and unfortunately has to wait out 5-4. Pidgey tops this category too, with a 26:08. Any percent multiplayer is pretty underwhelming, with the second player being able to simply go into a bubble, while the first goes through the entire game. It says it requires there to be 2 physical players no matter what, even though I could definitely see a runner getting past this rule. Anyways, Pidgey shares this record with AIDS, having a 24:46. The last category is all regular exits, which, well, I think you got it from the name. This makes the game surprisingly long, with Pidgey's record being 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 33 seconds. The last thing I can mention is that each category has a digital subcategory for the Wii U Virtual Console release, which only has runners under any percent. Not too much to dive into there. Released only 3 years after the original in 2010, we got the sequel to Super Mario Galaxy. This follow-up contains a huge chunk of its predecessor's composition. It adds onto that with the addition of Yoshi, as well as the Cloud Flower. Just like the original, there are so many little tricks, optimizations, and glitches that I'll never be able to completely fit here, but I'll brush through what I think is the most important. With the addition of Mario's friend, debatably the most broken glitch is being able to infinitely flutter with Yoshi, which is a must-learn if you want to majorly improve your times using speedrun tech. Just like the original game, there are a ton of resources to sift through, and in the description I'll be linking a huge document that further links to many other resources all connected to speedrunning the game. Each category has a handful of routes, and there are many tutorials made by people over the years. You'll notice that 2 variables exist among the leaderboards in the game. The first, Co-Star, we have already talked about, which is a similar case here. The second is Bank Toad, which refers to this toad, who's way too interested in star bits. Mario during the game can deposit star bits with said toad, and over time, these bits can collect interest, and this is useful when needing to feed hungry Lumas, which require them. Star bits that are saved with Bank Toad can be transferred via save files, and that's where this leaderboard variable comes in. Runners are able to download a save file onto their SD card, and copy it to their actual Wii's save data. After each run, you can delete the save data the game made, and simply copy and paste this save file over and over again. Lastly, just like the first game, you'll see the Japanese Wii U Virtual Console version dominating the boards. And with that being said, the categories are laid out the same as the first title, so let's just get through them quickly. Just like before, any percent requires getting the final star from Bowser's Galaxy Generator. Goryuga currently has the best time, with a 254.58. 120 stars in this game, just like the original, is dominated by Jay, with a 5 hour, 35 minute, and 18 second record. Jay has also done the same with 242 stars, with that time clocking past 8 hours and 52 minutes. Unlike the first game's 242 stars being 2 back-to-back playthroughs with Mario and then Luigi, the sequel instead has 242 unique stars. There's 120 power stars and 120 green stars. That also leads to the last category, which is green stars. This requires playing on a completed 120 star file. You use this to complete the 120 green stars throughout the game. Jay has been dominating both Galaxy games, with him getting the record here too, with a 30109. Setting this record gave him 7 out of the 9 total records across both Galaxy titles. In the 90s, we had Super Mario Land, but with the launch title of the 3DS in 2011, we got the next generation of portable Nintendo gaming. Super Mario 3D Land tries to take the best of both dimensions. Shigeru Miyamoto even described this title as 3D Mario that plays as a 2D Mario game. Having a wide array of power-ups such as Tanuki, Boomerang, and Statue Mario, this title is quite hefty, spanning 16 worlds, with each having at least 5 levels. This game is heavily centered around star medals, with 3 being in each level. Certain amounts of these medals are required to unlock levels throughout the game. For example, Bowser's final castle in World 8 requires a hefty 100 coins. This means throughout the run, players need to route which medals they grab in order to have enough to get past each requirement. Speaking of Bowser's castle, moving over to the first one in World 8, you won't believe this at first, but the speedrun strategy here is to first die 10 times in a row. This is because when you die 5 times, you unlock an invincible Tanuki power-up, and dying 10 times additionally unlocks a P-Wing. Despite dying so many times, this ends up being faster, being able to blaze through the level. Any percent uses multiple secret warp pipes to skip sections of worlds, and specifically uses a me with a black shirt, which allows you to get 2 star medals in the World 4 mystery box. This results in the any percent record sitting at a 53.31 by Zelda Cubed. Any percent warpless bans the use of warp pipes, with the best time not being too much longer. It clocks in at a 1 hour and 9 minute time, also held by Zelda Cubed. Special Ending requires you to complete the final castle in Special World 8. and after getting past that, beating Castle 2 in World 8. This gives you a picture of Peach in a Tanuki suit. Requiring you to get through every world, this run adds up to 2 hours and 35 minutes, with Sivir achieving the best time. Special Ending isn't where things stop though. There is finally a proper 100% category, which requires beating every level with both Mario and Luigi, as well as collecting every star medal and getting all golden flagpoles, which is done by grabbing the very top. Revelite 23's world record here is just shy of 5 hours. The community for this game is debatably quite smaller compared to any of the other games we have talked about so far, but even still, players do this run every so often, with the 80% record only being half a year old while making this. New Super Mario Bros. 2. Only just a year later in 2012, we got a second Mario installment on the 3DS, and this time it was the third in the New Super Mario Bros. Series. The two big power-ups here are Raccoon and Gold Mario, with the Mega and Mini Mushrooms also making a return. This title is heavily focused on collecting as many coins as possible, with your total coin count being very prominent. Getting 1 million gold coins gives you a new title screen, and maxing out the coin counter gives you a Gold Raccoon Mario statue. Anyways, getting further into the game, there's a total of 9 worlds. Worlds 1 through 6, and then 3 special worlds, Mushroom, Flower, and Star. This title was the first Mario game ever to have any type of extra downloadable content, or DLC. Moving to runs, the any percent route is in similar vein to previous New Super Mario Bros. Titles, using multiple warp cannons to skip through worlds. The route uses a cannon in World 1, Mushroom, and then Fire Flower, which finally then takes you to World 6. During this run, you'll see a mixture of the Gold Flower and Raccoon Leaf being swapped depending on what makes most sense in each level. Any percent is around a similar length to the previous entry, with J-Dude's record being a 26:04. Let's go rapid fire with the rest of the categories. Warpless adds a solid 20 minutes of length onto any percent, with J-Dude also topping that, this time having a 46:16. No secret exits once again is pretty self-explanatory, with Nanase having a 56:05 there. 100% entails completing every level exit and Toad House, as well as collecting every star and moon coin, and reaching 1,110 lives. With all those requirements, MChan338 reigns supreme here, with a 242:36. Any percent co-op is just like New Super Mario Bros. Wii, where player 2 can just go into a bubble. The record seems to be held by just one person, Juice AD, which makes sense considering player 2 doesn't need to do anything. Low percent isn't too much longer than standard any percent compared to many other small only runs, with Nanase having a 27:29 record. Lastly, all castles requires you to beat all 9 castles, with Juice ACD holding another record here with a 122:53. With this game mostly just being movement based, I don't have horribly much else to say here. If there are any runners of this game watching, let me know if I did somehow skip over something huge, but let's move on. New Super Mario Bros. U. Just a handful of months after New Super Mario Bros. 2, we got a fourth New Super Mario Bros. Installment, this time as a launch title on the very infamous console, the Wii U. The Super Acorn was the new power-up of choice this time, which is pretty much just a mixture of the propeller and a normal leaf. Past that, that's probably the most unique thing to say about this game. While it is a good game, many have criticized it for just being an HD New Super Mario Bros. Upgrade with new levels. Whether you love it or hate it, the game has 9 worlds, with speedrun leaderboards having 5 categories. Due to the game sticking pretty close to the plain New Super Mario Bros. Platforming style, this game doesn't have anything special in terms of exciting glitches or ultra-advanced tech, with the run being very based around pure platforming. Any percent is just under 37 minutes, with a 36:58 by Oko-san. This route takes a secret in 1-2 that leads you to World 5. With another secret in that world, you skip World 6 and play out the last 2 worlds. One step up from this, all castles more than doubles the run length, with As-6 having a 124:46. Continuing the bigger length, 100% requires completing every level and secret exit, catching Nabbit in all 7 worlds, getting all 3 star coins in each level, and finally completing the final World 9 Superstar Road. As-6 also has this record, grabbing a 3-hour, 22-minute, and 1-second time. Lastly, there are 2 miscellaneous categories. The first is low percent. The no power-up requirement increases the run by 6 minutes. Assix dominates this board too, grabbing a 42-49. The very last category to mention is any % multiplayer. Instead of the previous New Super titles where you simply make player 2 go into a bubble, this game has something called Boost Mode. This enables a second player the ability to tap the Wii U gamepad to make platforms spawn. This is able to assist the player in controlling Mario. Niels and Bramison share this record, scoring a 37-48. And there you have it. Not too much else to say about this game overall, but it does still get a bit of activity. Super Mario 3D World. In 2013, Nintendo drifted away from the new Super games and brought us a home console sequel to Super Mario 3D Land. Instead of just the two Mario brothers, you can now also play as Princess Peach and Toad. A huge thing for this title was being the first 3D Mario title to have simultaneous multiplayer, allowing up to 4 players at once. This game introduces 3 new power-ups: the Super Bell, which transforms Mario into a cat, the Double Cherry, which gives Mario a clone, and lastly, the Lucky Bell, which also transforms Mario into a cat, but this time also has the ability to switch to an invincible golden statue when ground pounding. There's 12 worlds in total, 8 main worlds and 4 bonus. Just like 3D Land, certain levels require a certain amount of collectibles to move forward. This time it's green stars instead of star medals. This leads to the any % route being similar to its predecessor, where you can be selective about which stars you grab. Each of the 4 selectable characters having their own physics, runners can also pick which character is the best for each situation. In fact, Mario is practically useless in this game. Peach is useful for her floatiness, Luigi for his higher jump, and Toad for his running speed. 2 warp pipes are used to skip a majority of Worlds 1 and 4, and World 8 starts with a really unique glitch, dubbed the Out of Bounds glitch. It's used to unintentionally fall through the overworld map and land back at World 4. Here, you can enter the World 4 Mystery House level to collect 10 additional stars. The reason this level isn't entered before is due to skipping it thanks to the 4-2 warp pipe. The NA % record currently sits at 1 hour, 35 minutes, and 50 seconds by Luigi Master. There's a great guide for this category that I will link below in the description. 380 stars involves collecting every green star placed throughout the game. This increases the world record time up to a 3:52:07 by Peedyboo. You may assume this is the 100% category, but it's not even close. 100% requires getting 5 stars on your save file, and this entails getting every green star, stamp, golden flagpole, and every level beaten by every character. The time required for this nearly doubles, with Valu's record being a 7:24:29. Mario % no power-ups is any %, but requires only Mario. On top of that, you cannot use a single power-up. Well, besides the ones that you temporarily have to grab. This increases the run by a solid 20 minutes, with Josue topping the board with a 154:15. Lastly, 243 stars is named after the total number of stars accessible before the post-game is played. The time ends when you grab the flagpole in the Great Tower of Bowser Land. Luigi Master has a second record here, with a 222:32. Super Mario Odyssey. 4 years later in 2017, Super Mario Odyssey on the Nintendo Switch took a bigger step towards the sandbox-like exploration in 64 and Sunshine. Mario this time is accompanied by Cappy, which can be used in a wide array of ways. He can be thrown into a wide net of enemies and objects. Some of these objects Mario can take control of when Cappy is thrown at them. This game is some of the biggest Mario exploration to date, having 880 moons sprawled across 17 locations, most of them dubbed kingdoms. With this title being released during speedrunning's huge spike in the mid to late 2010s, the game instantly became a speedrun phenomenon, with it comfortably sitting in the top 5 most speedrun games of all time, according to speedrun.com. At the moment, it has just over 5,000 total players. It's the second most run Mario game to date already, with 64 being the only one bigger. Out of any modern Mario game, this title has the most glitches and exploits by far. In fact, you can easily find 45 entries under a community-made speedrun wiki. With the game being so modern as well, Nintendo has also updated the game multiple times thanks to modern updating software. This is important because each version can make a huge difference in running the game. I'm nowhere near close to the best person to talk to when it comes to advanced gameplay here, but I'm going to try and summarize the history as best as I can. Like you would probably expect, Version 1.0.0 was the initial version of the game that was released alongside the game's launch. Right as the game released digitally though, the game got a day 1 patch, version 1.0.1. What's really the difference? Well, at the beginning of Cascade Kingdom, a trick was found that skips the very first moon in the kingdom, and allows you to directly get to the Madame Brood boss fight. Due to cutscenes being pretty long, this trick could save in upwards of 26 seconds. Unfortunately, version 1.0.1 and future versions patched this trick, which led to it being very inaccessible due to needing a physical copy. Due to this, the trick was banned right away, but with the game still being really new, a handful of skips to save time throughout the game were discovered pretty quick. Dino Skip in Cascade Kingdom, Sphinx Clip in Sand Kingdom, and Moon Cave Skip in Moon Kingdom. There are so many skips that were found throughout the game that I'd be here for quite a bit if I went down the list one by one. Later on, version 1.2.0 was introduced in early 2018, which added the new mode, Luigi's Balloon World. Unfortunately, besides this, the update also patched a handful of glitches, making it the slowest version of the game. This led to having a physical copy of the game making the most sense again, and this led to the first moon skip being unbanned. More and more tricks would get added, such as Snowdram, which was a joke stemmed from Dram55, who originally said he didn't like tricks named after him, around the same time he discovered an important trick in Sand Kingdom, which was named Dramstrat. Ironically, he has nothing to do with the Snowdram trick, with people just turning it into a joke. People also discovered that when Mario backflips and backthrows at the right precise time, his hitbox moves backwards. This means the hitbox can go through a wall, but normally the wall prevents clipping from happening. But when grabbing a moon at the same time, yeah, this game is even more broken. It didn't take too long for players to discover multiple ways to abuse this. By this point, the record was getting really close to a huge potential milestone, finishing the game in under 1 hour. With a wide array of world record contenders at this point, it became a race to shave more and more seconds off, record by record. Thanks to new additions such as multiple clips in Lake Kingdom, as well as general optimizations, times were getting lowered and lowered, with over half a dozen people potentially competing for this new major milestone. Finally, on March 23, 2019, Nicrovita, who had been staying at the top of the leaderboards for quite a bit already, finally did the unthinkable. 59.59. It wouldn't take too much longer for others to follow suit, but he could forever brag that he was the first person to beat the game in under an hour. Just over a month later, Nintendo pushed out another update, version 1.3.0. This version still patched glitches like previously, but to make up for that, the game's loads were significantly faster, and this led to this new version becoming the optimal choice for speedrunners. If you want a more fleshed out version of what I just described, I recommend SmallAnt's record history, which I'll link below. Since the end of 2019, only 2 people have traded the record back and forth, despite it being beaten over 30 times. At the moment, Tyrone18 is the victor, with a 56.55. With the game still being quite new compared to most entries in the series, it'll be exciting to see how much further this progresses over the coming years. The best segmented time thanks to community efforts is over 2 minutes faster. One last thing for any percent is that it does have a 2-player variant, where the second player can control Cappy. This category is theoretically faster than 1 player, but it hasn't been optimized in real runs for obvious reasons. People have even done player 2 runs on their own, including the record. 04Dude3, who has the record at a 58.35, uses his feet to control Cappy. Quite impressive. After all that, there's still 5 more categories that cover all the other stretches of the game as a whole. The first is World Peace, which is dubbed from the achievement Toadette gives you named Achieve World Peace. This requires beating the proper story of the game while getting the required amount of moons to move on from each kingdom. In standard any percent, you don't have to beat every boss along the way. This requirement adds a lot more onto the run, with Tyrone's current record being a 1:11:43. Dark Side involves collecting 250 moons and beating the gauntlet that is Dark Side as fast as you can. This extends the length furthermore, with Tyrone's third Odyssey record in the list being a 1:39:49. Darker Side is an even longer extension of this, requiring 500 moons in order to beat the Darker Side Kingdom as quickly as possible. In both these 2 categories, buying a duplicate moon in any of the shops is banned. The fastest version for Darker Side is the digital version of 1.1, due to a trick called Frog Skip. This is now banned due to how inaccessible the version is, with 1.3 now being the version of choice. All moons consist of collecting all 880 moons throughout the game, and then finally beating the harder Bowser fight in Moon Kingdom. Just like the previous two categories, buying duplicate moons from shops are banned, and starting in June of 2021, taking breaks in the category became acceptable. Depending on how long your run is, you can take a certain amount of breaks for certain amounts of time total. Up to the 4-hour mark, you can get a 1 15-minute break, and between 4 and 8 hours you get another break with an additional total of 15 minutes, and it keeps going on. And this means you must pause your timer, but you must mark your run as using this timing on the boards. It's also important to know that you're also required to go to your Switch's time settings and keep the time at the same exact spot, due to the system's time being a possible exploit in the game. Currently, the top 4 runners don't take any breaks, with Hey There Cool's record being 7 hours, 19 minutes, and 54 seconds. Finally, there's 100%, which requires collecting all 880 unique moons, buying every souvenir, costume, and hat, besides the DLC ones, capturing all 52 enemies, and filling out the entire music list containing 82 songs. Just like all moons, the same break system was implemented into 100%. Hey There Cool also has the record here, where he didn't need to take any breaks just like before. His time totals to 8 hours, 33 minutes, and 57 seconds. With the game having way less years to grow compared to its predecessors, it's safe to say Super Mario Odyssey has plenty more stored in the future. Time will tell what actually happens, but no matter what, it has become one of the most active and competitive communities to date. New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. Entering 2019, Nintendo would present us with the second Super Mario platformer on the Nintendo Switch. Kinda. New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe is an upgrade to New Super Mario Bros. U. This release was a great way to give the game a new life, on a way more popular system. This title contains both the base game, as well as the New Super Luigi U DLC that came out later. Toadette becomes a playable character for the first time in the series, and has an upgraded form that can be gained, dubbed Peachette. The speedrun leaderboard is divided by 3 main tabs: New Super Mario Bros. U, New Super Luigi U, and both games. Under that, they also have 3 subcategory tabs: Any percent, All Castles, and 100%, with both games having a 200% due to having to beat both combined titles. Things go even further, with each subcategory having a drop-down menu of Normal, which in this case means being able to play as multiple characters, Mario, Toadette, and Nabbit. Lastly, one important note is that the top times in the Normal Any percent categories have both a time with and without loads, with the rest of the times just removing loads. This title has the most amount of main categories out of any game so far, and it's not even close. Strap in, let me go rapid fire on all the records here. And let's just start with New Super Mario Bros. U. With all the characters ranging in ability, each subcategory ranges in time by quite a bit. For Any percent, records range between 34 and 42 minutes, with Aztecs having the best in Normal, and Nevadra having the rest. All Castles is quite different, with each subcategory having a different record holder. Nevadra and Normal, Aztecs and Mario, Wom Wom and Toadette, and finally Alien Shocks and Nabbit. 100% has a different situation, with Nabbit not having a single runner. All of these runs are around the 3.5 hour length, with Aztecs at the top with Normal, and Skiller Killer 2003 having both Mario and Toadette. I don't want to go too in depth about New Super Luigi U, since I think overall that is better suited for Layer 2, and you may have noticed that I didn't mention it at all earlier. To quickly sum it up, since I'll say more later, this add-on is quite a bit shorter, but for what was considered to be a DLC, it still has a hefty amount of content. Records in this version range from 23 minutes in Any percent to 2.5 hours in 100%. To round things off, the last tab, Both Games, involves making each category a playthrough of both games back to back, rather than splitting them up. Similar players hold top times here, with Nevadra's Any percent record being 66 minutes long, M-Chan's All Castles pushing 2 hours and 42 minutes, and lastly, 200% being the longest by far, 6 hours and 19 minutes from Skiller Killer. With that, that's one modern re-release down, and one more to go. Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Like New Super Mario Bros. U, Super Mario 3D World got the Nintendo Switch re-release treatment, this time with the addition of Bowser's Fury in 2021. Mario has to team up with Bowser Jr. to free every island in Lake Lapcat by collecting cat shines in order to defeat Fury Bowser. 3 different places have the Giga Bell power-ups that are locked behind grabbing specific amounts of cat shines. This power-up transforms Mario into Giga Cat Mario, and is used to fight Fury Bowser. To finish the campaign, at least 40 shines are required, but that's not fully the case. This leads me to talking about the any% categories for this game. You'll see the categories having a No Amiibo and Bowser Amiibo subcategory. Scanning a Bowser Amiibo causes a Fury Bowser to appear in the game. In a typical playthrough, you will fight Bowser 5 different times, and quickly I just want to say, thank you to Icy Snowman for this explanation, original video link below. When Mario collects a cat shine with Bowser active, his health will go down by around 5%. Taking advantage of this, you can lower Bowser's health to just below half. And why half? Well, for fights 2 and 4, you bring his health from full to half, and then he runs away. So if you can just get his health down to that halfway point without fighting him, that can save you at least 1 fight cycle. That may sound great, but in the realm of speedrunning, beating the game with 40 shines is slower, at least until Amiibo comes into the conversation. When spawning Bowser right before collecting a shine, you get the same exact effect without having to wait as long. This has led to the any% No Amiibo record by Nintanner being 26 minutes, while the any% Bowser Amiibo record being only 17 minutes by XVexum. Something I should mention before moving forward too, is that people have figured out how the Bowser's Fury timer actually works. It was believed to be RNG, but it's actually a combination of shine count and flags set up at specific times. There's quite a lot to it, so I'll link a full document explaining that as well. 100 shines is the 100% equivalent in the game, and has a pretty similar situation with the Bowser Amiibo. Both variants are held by XVexum, with No Amiibo being an hour and 7 minutes, with Bowser Amiibo being a high 51-minute time. What I have mentioned so far is just a tiny fraction of the leaderboard, because this is not just about Bowser's Fury. Super Mario 3D World has similar categories to the original here, with all the records being faster in the Switch re-release. I imagine a lot of that comes from faster load times and slight game tweaks. Getting times out of the way, any% is 9 minutes faster, 243 stars is around 14 minutes faster, 380 stars 34 minutes faster, and lastly there's Itemless, which is just like Mario % no power-ups, except you can choose any character. In this case, mushrooms are allowed, which kinda ruins the name of the category, but the name probably wasn't the most accurate to begin with, just like the original title, because there's some power-ups you have to temporarily grab. Anyways, the run is around 22 minutes faster on this version. There are also 2 categories that entail completing both games back to back. 220 SS, or Star Shines, is 170 stars in 3D World, and 50 Cat Shines in Bowser's Fury. Shoyu Parfait has the top time here, with it being just under 2 hours. 480 SS is the ultimate 100% category, requiring all 380 3D World Shines, and all 100 Fury Cat Shines. Chunganor has this world record, clocking in at 5 hours and 12 minutes. So I got through 3D World, Bowser's Fury, as well as both games together, but believe it or not, that still isn't the end. There are 3 miscellaneous categories hidden on the boards. Boss Blitz requires collecting 240 stars, and then defeating Boss Blitz, which is a gauntlet of multiple bosses back to back. The record held by Josue is 2 hours and 28 minutes. And before, I may have lied about the 100% equivalent in this game, because this time, 100% really is the ultimate 100% category. Well, kinda. This is just for 3D World, and not Bowser's Fury. It requires getting 5 stars on your save file. You need to collect all green stars, stamps, gold flagpoles, and every level completed with all 5 playable characters. Miuzu Mamarin's record here is a 726.27. There's an even deeper category than this though. Normal 100% allows you to use more than one controller, which can speed up the process when it comes to beating levels with each character. True 100% bans this, and Cactus is the only runner, having a 14-hour and 34-minute run. Last but not least is 81 shines. This means collecting every shine possible in Bowser's Fury, without entering the post-game. Just like any % and 100 shines, no Amiibo and Bowser Amiibo variants are present. With the category not being too popular, Nintanner has the record on both versions, since no one has ran it using a Bowser Amiibo. Their time is a 49.12. Alright, now we are finally done. I promise there's no more hidden categories, at least for this layer. That's every mainline game under the most successful video game series of all time. It's quite amazing to see the evolution of both speedrun communities and strategies, and it's cooler to see how each game has been approached based on how old it is, or what kind of system it's on. All these Mario titles have one common overlap, but they're all unique in their own special ways. These games have been enjoyed by multiple generations at this point, and with the rise of speedrunning said games, it's been discovered by people that may have otherwise never played it. In some of the older games, the record holders are younger than the games themselves, and across the entire series, some runners have had a passion for the series longer than some of their competitors have been alive for. While this has been a hefty ride, it's only just the beginning. With the success of the franchise, the series has gone in multiple directions never imagined. Stay tuned for part 2, where we will be diving into the second layer, which tackles some of the plumber's many other iterations. Thank you for watching.